Hello and welcome back to Sinews of War episode 3. In the previous episode we saw the beginning of a war which fortunately wasn't a massive world war against everyone. We ended up just being at war with France, which was great. The first act in this war was to attack their fleet near Madagascar. We had the advantage using the fleet under Admiral Doven. We came in close with 2 lines of ships and were easily able to destroy the French, capturing all of their ships in fact, and even putting one of them to use in our own fleet. So with them defeated, we captured all of the trade nodes near Madagascar, but then had a problem with pirates. A rogue pirate ship attacked one of my trade vessels. I tried to face off against them, coming in for a close range engagement, but we got the worst of it and had to flee, and in the end, my ship was sunk by the enemy. In the Americas, we made an attack on the Windward Islands. The town of Martinique was under siege by Van der Sau and he rushed in to capture it from the weak French garrison. The battle was quite easy, though with one surprise moment where the enemy general sacrificed himself in a sudden attack on my flank, but it all worked out okay. Perhaps some of the younger captains aren't completely familiar with my background. I was the man who witnessed the fall of the First West India Company. The man who shouted loudest when the downfall was inevitable by my own account. But you all know how it went. And so then I became the man who saw everything he worked to protect be systematically destroyed, while the company directors retired to Europe. I was left with the instruction to preserve the company as long as possible. And those of you who hailed from that time will agree that we did all that could be done. But slowly, the fleets were lost to piracy and to competition. People tell me it was my leadership and mastery of the seas that kept any scraps of the company afloat. I say it was blind fortune at play. But just as I had set my sights on a memorable death at odds with the Spanish, we got word that the money of Europe was coming back. A second company, picking the scraps of land out of my arms and promising to piece them together into an American empire. A good joke, I told the sod trying to tell me this. But of course, there was nothing funny about the arrival of Mr. Lodewijk and General Van der Sau. Now there really is hope for us lads, and for me, it is time to show the new world why the name Calumba used to ring loud over these waters. This is an opportunity for revenge for us old men, and for a glorious life for the rest of you. So gents, you have your orders. Let's to the ships, and make the Second West India Company a peg or 2 above the first, eh? We're on the battle results after the attack on Martinique, where as you can see fundamentally everything went fine. The settlement is ours. We need to repair up the governor's house and give it some roads. They haven't even put the roads in, the French. We're also going to replenish some of these troops because there's a decent chance we're going to move on to fight again in the near future. Now the town itself isn't as rebellious as Antigua, which is great news. Its resistance to foreign occupation is much lower, meaning it's going to be only a short time before we get this place under control and are able to move the garrison out without any serious repercussions. I can even keep taxing them for now. The main worry, of course, is that there are going to be repercussions. The French look like they're about to attack Guyana here, and we need to try and defend against their attack because that's our most valuable region in the theatre. So, in order to do that, I'm going to move troops out from Curaçao. I've got 2 squads of line infantry and a squad of militia who are going to join the navy, led by Admiral Gerard Calumba, who we heard from earlier, in order to go down and reinforce the position. I'm going to take all of my ships. Right now, the port in the area is actually occupied by a pirate ship. It's a race-built galleon, a powerful ship, but I thought all of my ships could take it on, but I didn't realise you can't actually engage a ship that is blockading a port, or is in the port as it is now, so we're going to have to just leave it. Instead, I just land the troops by the settlement, which is fine also, because they're in reinforcement range of the settlement. That's all I really need to do. So if they're next to it, and the French attack, we'll have those units coming in as reinforcements, and I think that will be an okay engagement. So I'm willing to allow it. In fact, they'll probably intercept the French before they arrive from their current position. So the ships will at some point be able to take on that race-built galleon, but before we do anything else in the Americas, I need to switch back to Europe, where we've got some more naval action to do, because we know the French main fleet has moved out to the Americas. We saw it in the previous episode, and that means I'm pretty much free to just come in here and start messing with the French ports. First we attack their trade port, denying the French any income from trade, and then I attack a shipwright. Less important, but they'll have to spend money to repair it. You can see I actually accidentally sent just the admiral to do that, so we're going to have to bring him back into the fleet, and the fleet will now return to our own docks. I also had a rake in French territory you can go and sabotage their boarding house. The chance of doing it wasn't all that good, but I thought I'd give it a shot, and luckily enough, it worked. So we've done major damage to the boarding house, and that means they'll have to spend a decent amount of money if they want to repair it or take the public order hit. Now you might also remember I'd left a battle in the previous episode. We need to finish off this pirate ship. That pirate ship has already taken down one of my ships in the area, and I've banded together 3 ships to try and take it on. That ship's much bigger than ours, it beats all of ours ship to ship, but we've got 3, so we might be able to team up and just about beat it, and the balance of power is equal, suggesting that this is going to be possible to do. So let's head down onto the seas and give it a go. I began by crossing in front of the enemy's path of advance, getting some free shots against them before they turned their broadside. Those inaccurate shots fired at the front probably won't do much damage, but you can see I can now turn with the wind and basically be very manoeuvrable as we come in for the first broadsides, allowing me to snake right around them, sail in a circle right around the enemy's ships. Of course, when the enemy returns fire against me, it does big damage. The enemy has a big firepower superiority, and our little boats with low numbers of guns aren't doing all that much against the enemy. But when we circle around them like this, we're going to have all 3 of our arcs of fire focused on the enemy, as you can see. So we have more guns overall. So as long as we're in this particular formation, the firepower advantage shifts onto our side. So we're going to keep pounding the enemy, staying at range, trying to reduce the strength of their hull. Once I'd circled around them about half a circle, I decided that my trailing ship should tail off in order to be in a separate position and try and fire on the enemy from unusual angles, especially because the enemy's maneuverability will mean we're basically locked in a broadside battle now. I'm not going to get any chances to hit in the front or rear unless someone tails off. So after doing this, the enemy firing against my main ships actually routed the first of the 2 ships leading the attack, which was not good. My sloop did get behind the enemy and got some shots on their stern, but you can see the enemy are shooting my stern as well, so it's not good. So 1 ship appeared to be lost. So we're now going to turn off, and the sloop is actually going to be ordered to board the enemy. This wasn't because I actually wanted them to board, I just wanted them to close to range as quickly as possible. I thought a boarding order might make the AI sail in real fast. Meanwhile, my other small ship is going to try and duel with this giant enemy 5th rate, I believe it is, and mine is a brig. We're coming in really close as well. Luckily, my other ship came back from routing. It's damaged, but it still has guns left, so it can support from a distance. So this brig, being very daring, sails in really close, prepares a broadside and fires into the front of the enemy ship. And you can see it's really smashing their hull apart. Shots at close range do big damage, but they can do the same right back to me, so this is very daring. Although it actually got even more daring because I came in real close, so close that the guns on their second deck couldn't even hit me. And now we're going to fire a broadside right into the lower part of their hull at point blank range. You can see the enemy ship's hull there is really damaged, and they're starting to waver now. They're actually so damaged that taking any more damage causes them to waver with every volley, which means we now have a chance to actually rout this ship. My undamaged sloop comes in to give them another volley on the other side. If it had been the same side of the brig, that would have been better, but still, a volley damaging the other side of the hull, causing panic among the crew. Both of my brigs are really damaged by the enemy's return fire. They're on the verge of routing themselves, but eventually we are able to do enough damage to the enemy that their guns are pretty much just not firing at this point. Their ship is struggling to stay afloat. You can see one side of its hull is virtually annihilated. It's on the verge of sinking, this boat, and at this point they finally rout. All of our boats took damage, the sloop being best off, but the 2 superior boats, the brigs, really damaged, probably unable to fight another engagement, but perhaps they won't need to, because the defeat of this pirate ship means that once again the area around Madagascar is under our control completely.
After a week of searching, we finally reached the place where it was safe to go ashore. No cliffs or woods to hide the French. No one was admitting it, but we were pissing ourselves about the fact that we had no idea if the French had already killed the garrison. If that had happened, we were next. But here I am on the shore, still bored, still spending the days, wishing this was over already. At least the ground isn't shaking us to sickness anymore. So, next we have a little walk ahead of us apparently. Got to find these plantation owners we're meant to be saving. And the French we're meant to be killing. I'll let you know how that goes.
The pirate ship was presumably so damaged after that battle that it must have sunk shortly after it ended, so we don't get any captures after the fight, but the important part is that this area is now ours once again. So we're going to send these damaged ships back to continue their trade. We probably want to get them repaired at some point, but for now, getting the trade income is more important, so I'll probably create replacement ships to come in and swap out. These guys can go back to a port and repair, and then come back to further enhance our trade income. You can see right now we're making absolutely loads of money, way more than we even need, so that means we can probably expand our forces across the various theatres to make up for it. Now moving on, France make the attack I was expecting on Guyana. They're besieging the town but not attacking, which is perfect since I can now deploy my reinforcements against them. The main thing I was worried about though was actually the French fleet and main force, which we saw heading towards the Americas but still hasn't made an appearance. It should be in the theatre by now, and I expected it to move during that intern sequence. So I don't know where it is or what it's doing, but at least right now we can focus on what we do know, which is that we have to deal with these guys here at Guyana. The enemy have 2 squads of archers, a general and a squad of militia. We should have a more powerful force nearby, so I'm not too worried about it. Switching quickly back to Madagascar, I saw that the Swedish have put a major fleet on the trade node that I hadn't occupied. Inconvenient, so we can't quite monopolize the area, but at least we'll still make a fair bit of money. Now back in Europe, you can see I'm building up a small army here. I'm considering basically sending forces into France to start messing around with France's interior. We don't have an army big enough to actually take Paris, but what we can do is move in and destroy all of the infrastructure, destroy their schools, all of things providing public order and money to them, which will just weaken their war efforts. So I'm going to continue to recruit troops here, and once I've got a little army together, I can simply sail over, land in one of their docks, and see what I can do. Before all of that though, we need to of course deal with the Guyana situation. First, I'm moving Calumbra and his fleet down towards the docks that are currently occupied by the pirates, because I knew I could get the pirates outside of the docks if I deployed an infantry unit into it, and then we can take out that pirate ship and get everything back in order. First though, to free up an infantry unit, I need to defeat this French army, so we'll kill these guys, send an infantry unit back to destroy the pirates, and then we'll have the province back under our control entirely. So it's time for battle. It seemed it was the wrong choice having the reinforcements lead the attack because the mortar can't get involved, but we should be okay even without it. We have a numerical advantage and in my own assessment a power advantage. The enemy bringing archers isn't going to bring them too much strength, although at least that's what I thought at the start of the battle. We'll see they're actually quite an interesting unit once we get down onto the field. So when the battle starts, I deployed my 2 professional line infantry units in hiding here in this forest. You can just barely see them in the darkness there, hoping that what the enemy would do was see my 1 unit of militia out in the open and immediately start advancing towards it so that I could draw them into a position where they were easily outflanked by the line infantry. But that didn't work at all. The enemy didn't move. They're just going to sit in the middle of the field. And interestingly, the reinforcements from the settlement actually come in behind the enemy. I didn't expect that from the campaign map, but a welcome surprise by all accounts. So we're now going to have the enemy thoroughly outflanked as we make our advance. We're basically just going to attack them from all sides. We can only see their militia and general. We know they've got those 2 archer units, but they're a unit that can hide even in the open. And I eventually discover one of them as I advance towards their position. So we begin engaging with the archers, and almost immediately we discover these archers are actually something quite powerful. I was expecting them to be similar to the Native American archers you get in Empire if you play as one of the North American native tribes, which is basically archers that can't do anything. They won't inflict any casualties on a line infantry unit. But right here we have quite the opposite. These guys prove to be far superior to line infantry. They fire quickly and accurately into our ranks, perhaps because they are slightly more trained, these guys. They're able to use their weapons more effectively in a line battle situation. So I totally underestimated them, and you'll see my men are going to be dropping pretty fast. We did, on the good side of things, get a volley off on their general who strayed into our range. That was nice, although it didn't really do much damage. An archer unit appears on my flank there. They can appear out of nowhere. They can get really close while still in hiding. So we had to fall back to get out of the way before we took flanking fire from them. Here you can see my main unit, which is just engaging with the enemy's archers. It's already lost about a quarter of its troops. We're losing men fast. On the other side of the battlefield, the enemy's general made a very slow charge into my line infantry. We don't have square formation or bayonets, so there's really nothing we can do about that. Although I think in a straight melee we will eventually defeat the general, although with large loss of life. You can see I'm going to try and turn off to get more shots on him first. We are going to be able to outflank their militia in the centre using line infantry and our own militia, so we'll at least win that part of the battle. And against the enemy's archers, I've got my irregulars, my light infantry, Native Americans themselves, firing on them. So we are inflicting damage, but my militia are taking extreme losses. They're already down to shaken, and I've lost, I don't know, a third of their troops at this point. So I had to get them out of there. Now, flanking fire on this unit of enemy militia isn't doing all that much because my militia are so inaccurate, but I'm hoping we'll grind this unit down and then free up our units. Yes, I heard. A real scrap, they say it was. The real news was what the natives were doing. The French had these primitive warriors from the jungle who they'd given lessons in avoiding the terror of musketry. So they stood strong and just filled the sky with arrows like it was the Bronze Age. Normally nothing to be concerned about, but you can't argue with the results. Far more deadly than our own boys' return fire. I think then that there is certainly something to be said for letting the primitives fight for us. They don't need much pay, they have all the brutish aggression you would expect of jungle folk. And there aren't going to be any complaints if they're killed. Might as well make use of them is all I'm saying. Finally, that one unit of archers did break. I was able to use my irregulars to try and kill some of them to make sure they didn't come back, although I think they did briefly come back from routing later, but to no effect. So we now need to deal with that other unit of archers, which has now exposed itself in the open. It's actually firing at my militia on the other side of the field, basically counter-flanking my flanking maneuver. So while they're facing the other direction, I decided to come in really close with my other units right up behind them to get some close-range fire. Meanwhile, my irregulars can start firing on the enemy's militia in the centre, so that this unit of militia doesn't have to flank anymore. We'll still have the enemy's unit in the centre outflanked in several directions. As I run away, the enemy's archers turn round and start engaging with the units coming behind them. They can turn and fire very quickly, much more suited to the weird nuances of Empire Total War's targeting system, I think, because of their fast reload. Meanwhile, the enemy general is still fighting with my line infantry in the forest, both sides taking losses, but I think I'm getting close to killing their general, which will be very useful. The militia in the centre have been extremely heavily damaged, but their morale is still holding, possibly because the general is still on the field, so hopefully we can get rid of him. So now I decided to make a desperate attack. Seeing that as the archers were firing on me, we were already starting to lose that battle, I decided to charge them. This causes the archers to skirmish away, and while they're running, they're not firing, so we're stopping them from damaging us basically by just chasing them across the field. Their militia in the centre break at this point, so now as the enemy's archers run into the centre, we're going to have these archers totally surrounded, with the one exception of up there on the hill where my men are going to turn around to fire at the enemy's general who's trying to escape from melee. So everyone is now going to try and target those enemy archers. I'm going to charge them from multiple directions in melee. At this moment the enemy's general is killed, which is fantastic news. So now those archers are going to have to be put to the test in melee. Now I assumed at first these guys probably wouldn't be all that good in melee being an archer unit, but actually they're okay. They are a Native American unit, they can brandish axes, superior to my own troops no doubt in melee, but we do have them surrounded on multiple sides and a numerical advantage. So although I think they'll inflict more casualties on us than we will on them, they will rout far sooner, so overall we will defeat this unit, hitting them from all sides. Already now getting them down to wavering, a few more kills and I think we'll be rid of them. I did actually have my regulars outside accidentally fire into the melee, very dangerous, so I told them to stop doing that quite rapidly. So all we had to do now was take out those archers, but by the time I had done that, another enemy unit, those militia who routed earlier, came back from routing to engage with me. I turned off to engage in a line battle with them, while my irregulars fired at the enemy's archers as they retreated to make sure they wouldn't come back from routing. That militia unit luckily is already really damaged, their general's dead, the rest of their army is routing off the field, so obviously they didn't stick around for long. They fired a volley or two and then got out of there, and that concludes the battle. So we won in the end, and in fact it was a heroic victory apparently. It certainly didn't feel like it. The enemy took me by surprise with the power of their archers and we lost a lot of troops, but of course we've broken the siege of Guyana, so we're now free to move. Taking a look at the battle results, they're not all that good to be honest. We took heavy losses fighting a theoretically inferior force, more of a close victory rather than the heroic victory that was proclaimed, but we have enough forces left over to mean that we have a definitive advantage over the French in the area, so that's going to be useful. The French survivors fall back into their own territory, and I now need to decide what to do. I needed of course to replenish some of these units, being very damaged, but I didn't quite have enough money to just do it all absent-mindedly. The question in my mind was whether to pursue the French and attack them again. I ended up not doing this and instead taking a defensive position, although I somewhat regret it. I think attacking the French now would have actually been successful and even given us a chance to push on to take their settlement either this turn or in the next turn. But instead, I ended up just hanging around the settlement and replenishing forces. Now, the other matter, as I mentioned earlier, was to deal with the pirates locally, so I send a unit to push them out of the docks, and that works out fine. So they are now exposed on the sea. It's a single, race-built galleon in good condition. A ship that easily outclasses all of the ships I'm sending against it, but the fact that I'm sending absolutely loads means that gets totally overwhelmed when it comes to the balance of power. So, I auto-resolve the battle. We take some damage and crew losses, but importantly we actually capture that ship, which is great because we can't even recruit ships of that caliber. So we're adding that powerful ship to our fleet. We'll go back to docks and repair it, and then we'll have a very nice warship to use. So for Calumbra, this is a handy victory. He's going to head back to the Windward Islands because at some point Nassau is going to need to come off this island with the fleet and be deployed elsewhere. So this is a good base for him to sit at right now while he repairs the damage done in that fight with the pirates. Next up, on the same topic of putting troops into docks, I remembered I basically need to do this everywhere, as someone rightly pointed out in the comments, because it prevents speedy naval invasions. It prevents your ports being occupied by the enemy, which is extremely useful because if they do occupy them, they can deploy troops with full movement points into your territory, which can cause havoc. Down here in Guyana, you can say I actually moved my militia out of the port and had to do a switcheroo, moving a line infantry unit back in to make sure I was protected. I was worried that that might actually mean my defences at the settlement weren't all that strong and the French might counterattack, although as you'll see, that was a little bit of a moot point. Now interestingly, Britain lands a full army into France, which is a critical move, because if they take France, we are going to have a much easier time for ourselves, and then that French fleet I've been worrying about the whole time suddenly appears and lands a full stack right next to Guyana. They probably would have taken it this turn if I hadn't defended the ports, although it doesn't make a huge difference because we can't defeat them either way. Years of planning our defence, gathering the resources for rapid fortification, preparing traps and redoubts across all the provinces, and suddenly I'm gifted with an order to attack. What a strange time the Lord has made for us to live in. They believe that France has left its gates open to any takers, and we need to get in on the feast quickly before the British gobble everything up. Now I'm wondering if I should point out to them that in their hunger they might be ignoring the fact the Spanish of Belgium are simply waiting for us to leave so they can bring our republic back to heel. It might be easier to just play bets on the Lord's will and proceed as ordered. If it all goes wrong, well, at least we can laugh. Moving on, we spot a massive pirate fleet sneaking around there in the Americas, but it doesn't do any damage. We learn that one of our rakes here in France has been assassinated, almost definitely by the French themselves, so that is unfortunate, but of course we're going to get a chance for revenge very soon, because the army that's been defending Amsterdam has now built up to such an extent that it's ready to go and make a punitive attack on France itself. I'm going to leave behind those militia in the ports to make sure nothing can go wrong, and the rest of the army, mostly professional line infantry with cavalry and artillery support, a very nice army, is going to prepare to sail out. I'm also going to start immediately recruiting new units back in Amsterdam because there is a threat that the Spanish could attack at any moment, so we want to have a garrison around. So, the fleet now needs to work out where it can go. Unfortunately for us, the British have occupied the port just north of Paris, which means we can't land troops there, which is a real shame. So instead, we're going to have to make a hard landing somewhere else. There is actually another port on the west side of France, but it's too far away from the action. I want to land somewhat near the British army, we can see there, and there's an opportunity to do so landing near this road, right on the edge of French territory, so I'm going to do just that. The fleet itself is actually going to move on to attack that port in the west I mentioned, because the French have repaired it, so we're going to go right back in and damage it again, so the French are forced to spend more money repairing it and don't get any of the benefits of having that building. So the question now is really going to be up to what the British do, because they're apparently leading the attack. It kind of looks like they're going for this artillery fort. Their army isn't all that special. It might be enough to take Paris on its own, it's not clear, but if I'm able to support it in an attack, we could definitely wipe out Paris at this point, so we'll have to see what happens. Back in South America, I'm just having a little look at what the French forces in the area are like. They've got a small army over there to the east, but we're not too worried about that because, of course, they've landed a full stack right next to our settlement. We've got forces inside, but vastly inferior. We have these 4 units here, a unit of militia outside and some line infantry defending the port. Overall, probably not enough to stop a full stack of troops, so now I have to make a decision about what to actually do. Checking out their navy here, you can see it's of similar size to us, but has a slightly greater proportion of actual warships compared to our one. We have a lot of small ships, brigs and sloops in our force. Their land army is lots of line infantry, cannons and horsemen. A very professional force, not many militia, even has light infantry in it, a unit we can't even recruit because we haven't researched it yet. So overall, a decent force, which of course is going to be challenging, especially for our auxiliary and militia-based army here. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm basically just going to get out of the way. We're going to abandon the province and extract all of the forces in the province in order to form up with the forces of Van Nassau, so we can have one big army to challenge the French big army. This, of course, means the French are going to be totally free to take this province, and it's the most valuable province we have in the region, perhaps even the most valuable province in the entire world that we have, so it's a massive shame to be losing it. It's going to have a big hit on our income, so it actually is going to be difficult to survive long without it. We're going to need to get it back, but that isn't necessarily off the cards. So I have a small sloop there, bring our forces back to the Windward Islands here, where they're going to move up into the port. So at the Windward Islands we have the army of General Van Nassau as well, who's going to be able to support these men. So I'm going to move out and basically just link up with them in the port. It turns out the public order here at the Windward Islands is fine for me to do this. You can see I'm checking that here. So you've got all the forces we have available, basically. It's still not as strong as the enemy's army, and a lot of our line infantry are just militia rather than professional line infantry, which gives us a key weakness against the enemy. I was able to bring down a couple of militia units from Antigua as well, because the public order has improved there, so it's not such a massive deal. We don't have to have a big garrison, so they can join the army, although, as I say, adding militia to the army isn't really what we want to be doing. I'm going to recruit a few more ships and some line infantry back in Curacao as well to expand our power in the area, although this is going to take us right up to the limit of our income once we lose Guyana, so we can't get much stronger than this, and we're still not really up to the par of the French, but of course tactics and daring may allow us to win out and destroy them. Plus, of course, we're attacking their home region, which might really disturb them. So hopefully, in a waiting game here, we will be able to throttle France back in their homeland and allow that to overcome the massive advantage they have over us here in the Americas. I hope you'll join me next time to see how it all goes. The momentum of the West India Company had been entirely lost, just as quickly as it had been gained. The minor holdings taken from France were nothing in comparison to what the newly arrived French main army was going to take from them. The infrastructure to recruit an army to match its strength simply did not exist within WIC territory, and so it was down to a largely militia-based army to prepare a counterattack. Meanwhile, in Europe, the Dutch had a professional army of their own, which was attempting to play a trump card. They discreetly landed troops in France itself, aiming to put a knife to their enemy's neck in order to force them to submit. The struggle of the WIC was giving a chance for the nation as a whole to win a great victory. So thanks for watching. The war with France gets bloody next time with 2 huge battles in the next episode of Sinews of War.